Tracy here with another scrapbooking process video. This video is sponsored by Skillshare, and one of the classes I took on Skillshare got me thinking about grids, but not in the way you might think. More on that later. First, I'm going to take this photo, which I have printed out at a little bit less than 4x4, and I'm just going to trim it down a little bit. I just wanted it to have a little bit more room on the page. When I printed it originally at 4x6, it felt like it was going to be a little bit too big. I did want to crop it down to be mostly my face and my hair. This is a layout about my hairdo. And so I'm just grabbing some paper because I'm looking for some background paper here that will become the background of my layout and the base of my whole page. I have pulled out a very thick stack that I have of old Studio Calico paper. These are some of my all-time favorite papers, and I'm looking for mostly gray background papers because the layout is about how I am letting the gray grow out of my hair, and I'm stopping the dyeing process after 20 years of dyeing my hair, probably more than that. So I really love this paper with the circles on it. I like how light and airy it is, but I also really love the fun circles all over it. I thought it would make a really nice background. I'm just flipping through to see if there's any other papers in here that I might want. What I really love about these old Studio Calico collections is how neutral they are. And I'm drawing particularly from the line called Classic Calico. It's from way back in 2011. So I'm just putting those papers back, and now I'm ready to give a little bit more thought. I left out a couple of options, and I'm just going to give it a little bit more thought in terms of how I might like to combine these papers. What I would like to do is frame this entire layout with a border around the edge. I've given some thought to the principle of framing, and I'm going to use it in a couple of different ways in this layout, but the first way is here around the outside border of my page. And what I'm looking for is something. Originally, I thought that first Studio Calico paper with the pink and the colors in it was a little bit too similar because of the circles on it. So I'm looking for something that's perhaps a stripe. And I really do like that light pink stripe, but it feels like it might be just a little bit too subtle. And now this one is a little bit too bright. So I'm looking for something maybe in between these two things. Now that's just too colorful, so never mind that one. And now this one is a little bit like a hand-drawn grid or a screen. And it's nice. It's kind of halfway in between those two. It does have the structure of the lines on it, and it does have a little bit more bright color in places, but overall it reads as a fairly soft color. And so I'm liking that. I'm going to start by cutting down my background paper from 12 by 12 with the design strip as an addition to 11.5 by 11.5. That will give me a 1/4 inch border all the way around the outside. And I'm leaning towards this Bella Boulevard paper. As you can see, I keep going back and forth. That bright pink, I mean, my thought process here is that my lipstick is really the only color. And when I was cutting down the strips, I noticed, ooh, I really love this gray and white border, or this gray and white diagonal stripe. And it actually made me change my mind about the paper. It's like, thank goodness I flipped over the the little strip that I cut off, because I actually very much prefer this as my background paper. And now I'm going to take this hexagon. It almost looks like chicken wire. And I love this paper. I'm going to use this as my border around the outside edges, because even though it's also a very geometric type of a pattern, it's a much smaller scale, and it's circles, and the stripe is striped. So it gives me a little bit of contrast. It actually gives me a lot of contrast. There's contrast between the scale, and also contrast in terms of circles they're hexagons, but they kind of read like circles. You saw me take a chunk out of that paper, and that's because I might want to use it. And for a second there, I thought about using the back side of that too, but no, I'm going to go with this chicken wire hexagon type of look. And I'm going to use the same piece of paper, that chunk that I cut out of the center. I'm going to use it to mat my photo. Again, I really want to frame in this photo because this layout is all about me. Many of my scrapbook pages are about other people in my family and about my pets and my hobbies, but this one is all about me and my decision to grow out my hair. So as you can see, everything is very bland at this point, and I definitely need some color. But before I do that, I'm going to sew around the outside edges. That just reinforces the framing that's already done with the layering of the paper, and it also provides just a little bit of extra texture and dimension on those outside edges. I really love the look of sewing around the outside edge of a layout. I think it really finishes off a layout and just makes it look really pulled together. Here I'm using white thread, so it's basically like a tone-on-tone look. I thought about using gray thread. I definitely didn't want to use black thread because it would be too high contrast and it would pull your eye too much to the outside of the layout, and I want your eye to be drawn to the inside of the layout. These extra details around the outside edge are really just to kind of frame in the layout and give it a finished look. So I just trimmed off my thread, and you see I have lots of little extra scraps from those neutral papers, and I also pulled out this pocket of pink scraps. That's way too much stripes, so definitely not that. What I'm looking for in my stripes is, in my scraps, is I'm looking for something organic. Although I did pull out those really bold stars, they're really drawing me in because they're just so bold. But I'm really trying to find some organic shapes, or some organic patterns rather. And so the florals will do that for me. They'll just provide a bit of a softer component to this layout. Now, as I mentioned, I love this pink tone-on-tone star paper. It's just so bold, and I figure even though it is a very strong graphic element, I figure if I just use the very edge of it like this, I might be able to get away with throwing one more bold graphic geometric pattern on here. What do you think? Can I pull it off? I think so. Now back to getting some type of organic or floral pattern going on here. I really adore this paper, and I love the soft pink colors and also just the little detail of the stems on the flowers, and I love how part of it is blurred out and part of it is sharp. I'm just going to fix this. It was a little bit off center, so I pulled that off. Luckily my ATG is very forgiving and allows me to pull things off like that. Now the flip side of that really beautiful floral pattern is this really pretty polka dot. And again, this is a geometric element, so I'm a little hesitant to put yet another geometric pattern on here, but it's so soft with that beautiful mint green that I think it works on this page. I'm just playing around with how I might want to layer some of these elements. I definitely want to use that pink paper with the floral on it. What I love about the pink floral paper is that it brings a really nice strong gray element into my layers, which so far my gray is on the background paper, and of course there's gray in my hair as well in the picture, and that's what the whole story is all about. But I want to have some gray in my layers as well, and that pink floral serves two purposes. It's a nice organic non-geometric pattern, but it also brings some gray into my layers. So you see I'm doing a little bit of a cheater method here with this piece. The piece was small and I didn't want to waste it, so I just cut it in half to make it look like it spans the distance of the back of the photo. And now it was a little bit too tall, so I just cut it down a little tiny bit, and now it fits nicely with that other floral pattern. And I'm going to use this pink and gray floral to anchor my layers and my main elements of this page by cutting a fairly heavy, what I mean by heavy is a strong horizontal element that's going to basically serve as a ledge upon which my other elements will sit. So now I'm thinking I would like to frame out my photo even more, and so I'm going to add some stitching on both sides. I switched my stitching to zigzag so that I could have a really nice zigzag stitched frame on each side of my photo here. That again just brings a little bit more detail and interest and texture into my layers. And I just left little bits of the thread hanging because I really like that soft look. The white thread really softens my pages. So another thing I'm going to do here to add to the texture on this page, besides leaving those little bits of thread hanging, is I'm going to pull up the edges of some of these papers, and I'm going to focus on pulling up the vertical edges, and that just gives the page and the layers a little bit of structure. So you see I'm just pulling up all of these vertical edges that I can. Some of them are sewn together, so I can't pull those up, but any vertical edge that I can pull up, I am. And I'll pop some little pop dots in there to keep the space. In the meantime, I've pulled up my Raskog, which is where I keep my letter thickers and stickers, and I'm looking for some letter stickers that I think are going to work. I want something that's going to be a bold title and maybe a little bit organic as well, so something with flourishes or a script or something like that. I'm also thinking glitter might be good, silver and gray might be good because those would kind of carry into the story. So I'm pulling out a whole sample of different letter stickers that I might use. I really love the color of those Amy Tangerine ones. These, of course, are glittery, so it picks up on the idea of gray in my hair. This one is from Paige Evans, and I don't have quite enough letters, and I don't really love these, actually. They're holographic, and they're pretty, but I'm not wanting to use those. I thought about using these ones, but I think the scale is a little bit too big. If I made out my title, which is going to be Au Naturel, with those, it would be way too huge compared to the size of my photos. Now, this letter sticker, which is a rubber alpha from Studio Calico, really fits the bill perfectly. What it gives me is it gives me good readability because that gray is a darker gray than what's on my background paper. And I love the little curly cues that are on the descenders in some of the letters. I also really love that you can mix and match some of the fonts on this letter sheet in terms of you can pick letters that have flourishes or don't have flourishes. So I really like that about this alpha. So there's my title. As I mentioned, it's Au Naturel. And I'm just going to put this, I didn't repackage these stickers because they're slightly bigger size than my other letter stickers. And so I had to squeeze them back into their original packaging, and I'll just put those away a little bit later. For now, I'm going to cut down my wax paper so that it's easier for me to play around with where I'm going to place my title. And right off the bat, I thought I would put it up here. And I thought maybe anchoring it with something, but not that first piece of pattern paper because it's too similar to what's underneath of it. But maybe these two little strips here might give me a little ledge upon which my title can sit. Now, when I place this title up here in the corner, what I'm thinking about is balance. And one of the things that I learned in a Skillshare class that I took was the idea of using grids as a way to think about balance, which is not something that I had ever done before. I certainly have used grids in my layouts before, as you know if you follow me, but what I did was I took these two pieces of 12 by 12 cardstock that I don't think I'll ever use for anything because they're so brightly colored, and I thought about using them to think about this layout in terms of a grid. Now here I'm using a grid that goes 4 cells over by 4 cells down, and I really feel as though thinking about this layout in terms of thirds would have been better, but I had already cut up some paper into quarters, and so I was just thinking about how basically the photo and the layers kind of fill up, I guess, a part of the layout, and then there's a whole lot of negative space, which is what the yellow parts of the grid were representing. So basically we have 4 blue blocks over on the right and then 1 blue block up in the top left-hand corner, and that provides my balance. Now at the end of this video, I will show you how this works if you make your grid into thirds, which I think is really more appropriate for this layout, but I didn't want to stop my creative process in order to recut my paper into thirds. So I will come back to that idea towards the end, and you'll be able to better see how that grid represents the balance on this page. It's not something that I had really ever thought of before. Here I am just putting in some adhesive foam in between my layers just to hold the space, and I'm actually not tearing off the backing of those, so I'm not really using them as stickers, I'm just using them to hold the space. And you saw me place my little strip of pattern paper up here, and I'm just using a combination of my grid paper, my grid on my work mat and my ruler in order to make sure that that's nice and straight. So that's going to become another ledge upon which my title will sit. So I have a ledge that my photo is sitting on, and now here's another ledge. So as I place these letter stickers, I'm just using that ledge as my baseline so that they all look nice and even. And then as I place it, I'm just going to nest the little dangling flourishes on the descenders. I'm just going to nest them so that the title looks like it all fits together nicely. So I'm actually going to place the ascender of the T right in between the legs of the A, and I really like how that looks. And then finally I just glued down that last little strip, and now we have a little bit more weight up there in the top corner to help balance off the weight from the bottom. So here I am with my sewing machine again on the zigzag stitch, and I'm just adding a little bit of texture and dimension up on this top little cluster, cutting the threads so that there are short amounts of thread dangling, just to kind of repeat that I already have going on in the bottom. And now, so the yellow represents negative space, and you see me kind of filling it in here. I've got negative space and then I've got positive space. So there you go. And it looks kind of balanced, but you kind of have to use your imagination because it's actually more of a thirds layout. If the layout had smaller parts, like smaller components, it would have made better sense to use the quarters, the quarter grid. But again, you'll see that at the end, how it works with the thirds. Now I took out my cases, my little 4x6 cases of chipboard, and I've sorted them by color. I actually have 2 cases of pink because I just have so much pink. But I'm just going through them and trying to pick out little pieces. I like that swan, but I don't think it's going to make it onto the page. There's a Heidi Swap piece there that says, "Go ahead, be amazing." And so I thought that was kind of relevant. And I really like this banner that looks like little tassels or something that's hand-drawn, like watercolored. It's really nice. And so then I also pulled out my mint green because there is some minty, greeny, turquoisey colors in that patterned paper. And I also really like that smile chipboard piece. So lots and lots of chipboard on this one. And then these are from a very long time ago. These are from Dear Lizzie, one of her first collections. And I really like those little chevrons. So I'll use those as well. I'm going to keep those out in case I decide to use a few more. And then I'm just going to pack up these chipboard pieces and put them away. And I labeled them with a marker on the edges so that when they're standing up in my drawer, I can see them pretty easily. So now I have pretty much all of my embellishments all picked out, and they're all chipboard, but I need something to do some journaling on. So I pulled out my drawer here that has journaling tags and pieces and pockets and so on. And I'm just pulling out a couple of contenders for my journaling piece. I'm looking for something that's gray, not too warm, not with the wrong color scheme, and something that's not going to compete too much with what's already on the page. So I pulled out a couple of plain-ish tags here. This one fills up too much of that pink pattern paper. I really want to be able to see that there is a floral design on that, and where it's so spread out, if I layer something too big on top of it, you're going to lose the floral design that's on it. So this tag is the perfect size. It allows you to still be able to take in the fact that there are some of those beautiful gray roses on that paper. So this chevron, again, just kind of accentuates that horizontal line that anchors this whole cluster. And I'm going to use some glue to stick that in place. But first, I'm just going to mark where this tag layers with the other layers so that I can draw some journaling lines on it. I want my journaling lines to be perpendicular to the way that the tag goes, because the tag is going to be kind of tucked into the layers on an angle, like at a right angle. And so I'm just using my Sharpie pen to do some lines, and I made them not be even on purpose, just to give it a bit more of a casual look. I didn't want them to all be completely justified over on the left side there. And my journaling says, "No more hair dye for me," with an exclamation point. Pretty basic journaling. I like to be pretty succinct. And these are Studio Calico stamps that this one says "no more." And I really love these stamp sets as an alternative to using a roller date stamp. And I'm just going to pull out my Lawn Fawn ink, and I'm choosing bubblegum. And I'm just going to stamp this "no way." I just had to test it and make sure, oh, there's that gray hair that this layout is all about. And I'm just going to test it there. And then I'm going to triple stamp it actually right on the journaling piece. And that just adds a little bit of interest to my journaling piece there. I'm pretty sure that this tag is by Gossamer Blue. I could be wrong though, but I think so. It's an old tag and I don't have the packaging for it anymore. So I just used some adhesive to hold that in place. And now I'm going to take my Tombow Aqua glue. I think it's called Tombow Mono Aqua. And I put a tiny, tiny bit of glue on this. If you put too much, it will ooze out, and you don't want that. I'm just using my phone here as a weight to hold it down while the glue takes. It doesn't take too long for it to dry. There we go. And now it looks like that zigzag continues right behind my photo, even though we all know that it doesn't. I'm such a cheater. And now I'm layering some pop dots. I had to double layer my pop dots there so that that tassel-y banner thingy would sit flat on my page. And then I put single layers on either end, and that's really all I need, and just these tiny, tiny little Stampin' Up! Foam adhesives for the corners here, and that's really all I need to keep this in place. This was a chipboard sticker. In fact, all of the pieces of chipboard that I'm putting on this layout used to be stickers, and I used my powder tool to cover up the adhesive so that they're not sticky anymore, but now I have to, when I go to use them, of course, put sticky back on them. So there's that Heidi Swapp embellishment. I'm pretty sure it's Heidi Swapp. It says, "Go ahead, be amazing." And I thought that just kind of fit with the idea of kind of like, being yourself and embracing the aging process and the graying process. Just adding another one of those little Dear Lizzie chipboard chevrons, and that's just, again, that repetition around the page just helps everything feel like it belongs. I have a bit of pink, so I'm repeating the color, so I've got some pink and green up in that top corner as well as in my layers. Now I was going to use these, but look at them, they're so warm and they kind of take away from my idea of gray, and gray is such a cool color, and there is a little bit of yellow in there that warms up this page a little bit, but I thought that if I used those puffy hearts, as beautiful as they are, it would just add too much warmth to this page. I want it to be a cool page because gray is a cool color. So I decided to use these Studio Calico star stickers instead of those hearts. I'm going to put them here on the diagonal around the photo. It kind of brings your eye up through the photo, and it also, if you were to draw a direct line from the first cluster of stars to the second cluster of stars, that line would go right through my hair, which is what I want you to be kind of thinking about when you look at this layout. So even though it doesn't dissect the the photo exactly. It really draws your attention through my hair there. And then I'm just playing around with a couple of different ideas here of how I can cluster. I wanted to repeat a couple of stars up in this top cluster as well. Whenever I have a secondary cluster, I always like to repeat some elements. So bringing those stars up there was an important part of that. I have one more element to add to this page to finish it off, and then I'll return to the idea of using a grid to think about balance. But first, I want to tell you about Skillshare, who sponsored this video. As I return to scrapbooking after a hiatus in 2019, I'm looking at the hobby in a whole new light. I want to make 2020 a year of learning, both at work and in my hobby. So let me introduce you to today's sponsor, which is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives where millions of lifelong learners come together to take the next step in their creative journey. Skillshare has classes to fit your schedule and skill level. Members get unlimited access to thousands of inspiring classes with hands-on projects and feedback from a community of millions. You can learn and grow with short classes that fit your busy routine. Skillshare is also really affordable, especially when compared to in-person classes and workshops. An annual subscription is less than $10 a month, and the first 500 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get 2 free months of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. I've taken several Skillshare classes, including a couple on creative journaling and visual journaling, as well as a class on sustainable living and some graphic design classes as well. My favorite Skillshare class so far has been Graphic Design Basics by Ellen Lupton. This is a class that I drew from for today's layout. And in it, she talks about core principles for graphic design, including symmetry, scale, framing, and using grids. I found it really inspiring to learn these concepts through a scrapbooker's lens because although it wasn't designed for scrapbookers specifically, it gave me lots of new ideas for how I could apply the principles to my own craft. So I encourage you to make 2020 a year where you explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity with Skillshare's online classes. What you find just might surprise and inspire you. So thanks so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. So back to the process now. As I mentioned, I have just one last detail. It felt like it just needed something else. And so as you see, I just pulled out my chipboard again, and I'm thinking about putting something else up here by this cluster of stars. Again, I talked before about how I want to draw the eye from the first cluster of stars over to the left of the photo, up to the second cluster of stars up in the top right-hand corner by the photo. And so one of the ways to do that is with the stars, but I thought I might add something else over here just to kind of balance it off. But nothing else was really working for the space, as you can see. And I kind of felt like it was okay just the way it was. I really like this sticker right here. But it's not quite the right style. Like I like that it introduces another little pop of that yellow that shows up on the smile chipboard up in the top. But it's just a little bit too detailed. I think if it was a little bit more plain or boxy or not as elaborate, I think that sticker would have been perfect there. But I just couldn't find anything in my stash. And sometimes that's just the way it goes. You don't really have the right thing. And I also just felt like the stars themselves did a pretty good job of drawing your eye. And I don't necessarily need a whole lot of attention to go up to that. So this is one of those times when, although I do like to cluster things in threes and have, 3 main clusters, in this case, I really only have 2 really main clusters in terms of clusters that have multiple things in them. My third cluster, so the first one being over to the right of the photo, over to the left of the photo, and the second one being up by the title. And then this other cluster over here is really just some stars. So I thought about adding some wood veneer. I felt like I just needed some more dimension, something else with new texture on the page. And so I thought about adding some of these wood veneer stars, but as you see, I changed my mind on those. I really like the clean, crisp look of this layout without too much clutter. And so that's part of why I decided to not add some more to the layers in that third corner. But I did want to introduce some more texture. So I took out these 3 different hearts from my heart wood veneer collection, and I put 2 up under the title Au Naturel, and then I put 1 over top of that second heart on Amazing, or that heart on the Amazing, the Go Ahead Be Amazing chipboard piece. And what I really like about that is that it tones down that chipboard piece because it had the fairly dark arrow, but it also had a really dark heart, and covering up that dark heart makes the arrow be your main element that your eye goes to. And so I'm just showing the close-ups here, and then I'm going to pull out my strips again. I went ahead after I was finished doing this video and I cut 2 more pieces of paper. I'm using the same colors, so blue and yellow. You already saw me use the quarters, the papers that were divided into quarters. This time I divided them into thirds, and this really works better for thinking about the balance on this particular page. And so as you can see, I just have 2 12 by 12 pieces of paper, 1 in yellow and 1 in blue. Yellow is going to represent negative space, and blue is going to represent my elements. So as you can see, I have elements where the blue is, and then where the yellow is, I have white space. And you can really see how balanced this looks with this top corner balancing off the main elements. So if you're ever wanting to check your balance and just not sure how big your corner element should be, or whatnot, cutting up some strips of paper and playing around with it like this is a really great way to check your balance. I really wanted to use these quarters because I often have pages that have smaller elements on them, and I think that this kind of an approach is really good. I'm just going to show you a couple of different ideas here for balancing. One is kind of like a very obvious balance, which is to kind of alternate back and forth with this checkerboard approach. This is a really nice way to scrapbook a lot of photos on a single page. You could put photos in all of the places where the blue is, and then have white space be where the yellow is. But I also just wanted to show you how you can play around with some design principles here. And here we also have another really balanced look that's not quite as predictable as that full checkerboard. It gives me this beautiful diagonal, and I could put photos in some of those, and then other decorative elements in others. And here's another example of how those 3 alone don't quite balance, but once you add this extra one up here in the corner, it balances off a layout that looks like that. And those blue elements could be anything. It could be photos, it could be embellishments, it could be parts of a die cut background. You get the picture. You may see me using those strips in future layouts just to kind of further reiterate how to use that grid for creating balance on your pages. I think it's a really good strategy, particularly for beginner scrapbookers who are kind of trying to figure out, well, how do you decide to do something like one of these clusters that says Au Naturel, for example. So I hope you find it helpful. I certainly found it to be a new way to think about. I certainly had thought about balance before, but I hadn't really piece together those 2 ideas of using a grid and it being helpful with balance. So here are the close-ups of this page. I had a lot of fun making this one. Thanks so much for watching, and check out my other videos, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Have a really great scrappy week.